This video will contain spoilers for all of Endwalker as of Pandemonium's release, so please be aware of that going forward. It's an incredible experience to play through for the first time, so I would encourage you to go back and do that if you haven't already before you listen to this. Right, so back onto Labyrinthos. Or do we want to do Shallian first?
So, no, I was thinking we would go ahead and do Labyrinthos. Yeah, we do it your way because I think that's the way the game frames it, so let's go with that.
Okay.
And the sort of first cutscene we get before that is you and Alice sitting down, sort of eating, or she's, I think, drinking a cup of tea, which I won that Sharlayan mug.
Yes.
But she's kind of talking about that moment in Gridania with her and her father, which we'll talk more and more about Fourchenault, but I had no idea how they were going to in any way not redeem, because I don't think it's needed redeeming. I think it's just like I don't like how you can justify his actions. Yeah. And by the end of Endwalker, I think for me, I know everyone's going to feel people are going to have strong feelings about this. I didn't have to condone his actions to absolutely and utterly understand where he was coming from, why he was making the choices he was, and respect what he was doing and the burdens on which he was carrying on himself. I fully felt I understood him, and the important thing was not whether or not I condoned him. The important thing was whether or not him and his children were able to reconcile.
The quote that really sent it home for me the most was their mother was Emilience, when she says that it wasn't until they were born. He was always a serious man, but it wasn't until they were born that he threw himself into it. And I mean, that sort of contextualizes it for you a little bit in the moment. But when you learn about the nature of their mission and what they know is going to happen, doubly so.
Yeah, I thought I had the exact same thought the second time around. Where the first time I was like, okay, like caring for your children. The second time when you understand, oh, it's because now he needs. Their future has to matter, right? And then he explains it later too, right? When he's talking to them, and I love that he says it to them, right? It's not just this side thing to you. It's him talking to them. It's I didn't care if you hated me. I just needed to make sure you were able to be safe and alive, right?
Yeah.
And you can be like, oh, you're a stubborn dumbass. You can be like, did you have to do it that way? But regardless of all that, I think it's made so clear that you can understand absolutely where he was coming from and trying his damnedest to do what he felt was right?
Yes.
And I think the other important component there is I think Emilience really helps humanize him before he's able to humanize himself. And
which I think is true to his character. He has turned himself into, this isn't quite the correct term, but into a rubber. He's given up not all joy in his life. I don't think that's true, but certainly all of his life is dedicated to this strictly utilitarian task of saving his children.
He has the literal existential weight of the entirety of his not only species but planet on his back.
Yes.
And not in a bullshit taking it upon himself way. He was literally granted by God that like you got to go make an ark to get everyone off, and like he's basically Noah.
Yeah, the Noah comparison is definitely there.
Yeah, he's the second. He's Sharlayan's second Neonchrome.
Yeah, he is actually. Oh, nice. That's a nice callback. That's a good point. The Ark does represent a second Neonchrome.
Yeah.
They should have just built a teleporter like Garlemald did. That would have been much easier.
It would have been a lot easier. But I just wanted to say that at some point. Will definitely get back around to it when we have his more of a reconciliation moment. But because I trusted the writers to pull it off, but no part of me was able to fully understand or believe how they were going to pull off a narrative in which I could understand, even predisposed to offering my empathy, understand or condone his actions, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that Endwalker, for me, I know everyone's going to have different opinions, but for me, was a rousing success on that front is yet one more feather in its cap of its ability to tell potent, powerful, nuanced, and multifaceted character stories and connections, and not only making those character stories and primary story. The character stories are a fundamental aspect of what makes the primary narrative what it is.
Right. Yeah. I think something that would be great for the fandom to look into would be taking more of a nuanced and sort of deeper look into characters. I would love for them to do that with Hermes. I would love for them to do it with Xenos. I think some people are now.
Yes.
but these characters are not without their motivations. And although you can, slap your forehead and say, "Oh, stupid," Xenos is a stupid weirdo. Hermes is extremely obtruse and silly in what he does. They have their own rationales for why they do it, empathizable rationales.
And consistent ones, I would argue too. Like that's, and I think that's the thing that can be missed too. Is they did this thing, I would never do this thing. It's like, yes, you wouldn't, but they would.
Yeah, exactly.
And like that's so the important thing. It's like I'm not at all like Fourchenault. I wouldn't make the same choices he would, but I understand, right? Like that off, and I think the game as a whole works towards trying to make a player afford that empathy towards people, right?
Yes.
And so I do think the game does its damnedest, not just in being quality, but in like articulating itself towards predisposing you towards being that way towards a character. And I choose to believe that a lot of people are, even if they don't understand a character, they're willing to engage with a character. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that there's a large swath of the population, and I think the I don't even want to say vocal minority, but I think the most vocal people who decry certain things, are not necessarily representative of everyone. And part of what makes me assume that is because if they were, I think a lot less people would be playing the game.
I think that's true. That's plausible. Yeah, I think that makes sense. The idea that, yes, people have to be invested in these characters to continue to be interested. And I'm not really entirely sure how you could be invested in Alisaie or in Alphinaud. I mean, Alphinaud goes to extreme lengths to talk about how his father was out of line in Gridania, yes, but he doesn't have a good answer for sort of like taking on his decrying of war.
Yeah, and Alisaie has that same point too when you're talking to her before you enter Labyrinthos. She's like, I was so mad at him in that moment, and yet I have to admit I still don't have an answer to his, to what he proposed. And so
then she says that her current state is that she's realized that she can't answer it, so now she's just being angry.
Yeah, well, but I think there's a second part to that though, right? Which is that whole thing that Endwalker is about, which is that, and ultimately what they come to, right? That the answer is that because life is valuable and sometimes you have to act, right? That sometimes your conviction is enough, and it's not about the rationalization of being able to articulate every aspect of its point in word. Sometimes you can only achieve victory through conviction and not through debate, right? And through discourse or through speaking, which, I mean, even as someone who's most predisposed to speaking myself, as well as, the sort of person that like Alphinaud is, that is an important lesson, because it's true. Sometimes you can't face every force in the world through rationality.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Sometimes there are irrational things that cannot be faced with irrationality.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are still engaging, not a lot, sorry, I shouldn't say that. A few people that I've seen are still engaging with Fourchenault's character as if what he said in Gridania about not wanting to help prevent the final days was true. That's not actually what he felt. He just had a different way of doing it and couldn't tell us about it.
Well, and there's two parts to that. One of which, right, is that he very explicitly says we would know if it was upon us, making clear that what he's actually getting at is, no, we know, but like in some ways, he sees what everybody else is doing as distracting from not stopping, but saving everyone from the final days, right? Like in some ways,
preparing.
Yeah, he's looking at everyone like we could instead all be working together to prepare to stop this. I mean, not that he's going to tell everyone, obviously, right? But like to some extent, you can imagine he's convinced the best way to save everyone, the absolute best way to save everyone, is to get the Ark going and to escape the planet. Like that is his conviction is such, and it's only when his children are able to come to him with a stronger conviction that no, we can save this, we can save us, we can save our world, and that is a better course of action. And only upon able to convincing them through their actions is he able to relent.
Right.
You get that through Emilience's final comments to the kids, right? Which is prove through your actions that can't be undone. Don't use your words to try to convince him.
Yeah, because he's always going to out-debate you.
Yeah, and Emilience is fucking great. Emilience is so good.
Oh yeah, I love Emilience. She's such a good character.
She's just the level of like sort of wry, like little bit of like knowing character that you need in that moment, especially when you're contending with the seriousness of the relationship between the twins and Fourchenault. To get someone who's like just loving, but also is smart and understanding and knowing and understands her place and everybody else's place in all this is just real good.
Yeah, she's obviously a very perceptive person.
Yes. I was worried that, not worried because of the writers, I think just worried of a history of just not good writing around mothers, that she was going to be far more diminutive.
I was a little worried that she was going to be, I mean, it's probably not a series that a massive amount of people in this channel have watched, but the Weiss's mother from RWBY, a little meek, a little beaten down, almost not literally, of course, but you know what I mean. Very, very sort of withdrawn, which of course she wasn't. She's, you know, a force for nature as much as Fourchenault is. We've learned that very quickly.
And that's one of the things I really appreciate, and they do it with Venat too, is how quickly they clearly communicate character identities and the strength to which they have a personality and their competence. And
yes,
yeah, it's real good. And also this Endwalker has something with white-haired women with wry wit and slightly chaotic personalities.
That's a good point. So shall we move on to Labyrinthos proper?
Yeah, I was just thinking the same. So the comment we get from Emet-Selch is, deep beneath
the scholar's city shines a false sun within a fabricated sky. In any age exist those who consider the floor an extension of their bookshelves, and this vault's architects surely belonged to that special breed. If the stack grows too high, start a new one. If no room remains, then make more rooms. A simple solution at first, and then bit by bit, a profound transformation. Knowledge buried beneath knowledge, a growing,
creeping labyrinth from which there is no escape.
This is where I love the dual nature of this, because he's talking about Charlene, he's also talking about pre-sundering Aetheris, he's talking about Amarad.
Yep. There's always a fucking second meaning to what he's getting at with all of these, and sometimes it's more, or to a greater or lesser extent, but it's always there. And it also, again, I know we talked about it at the top, but just the fact that what's so great about him doing it is that when you meet him on Elpis, it's a surprise, but it's also like, oh, that's super cool. But it also gives you this like feeling of connectivity throughout the entirety of Endwalker, of his presence. Because he's present throughout the beginning, Elpis, and then the finale. And so it doesn't just feel like he comes out of nowhere.
Yes, I read a little mini essay on the subreddit, actually, one that I really enjoyed, and it was talking about how they were really grateful that Emet-Selch's, because a lot of franchises, for want of a better word, would to bring that back to this extremely beloved one-hit wonder character in a way that felt forced.
They'd milk it.
Yeah, or overuse it. But Emmett, it doesn't feel that way. It does feel natural. His character feels... And it's not like... He's not changed. Emmett's still like a bit of a dick when we meet him in Elpis.
He's an absolute drama queen, that's for sure.
But I also think, and the sort of mini essay mentioned this, that Emmett being a dick might have gotten a little bit dry now, but Hythlodaeus takes the edge off of it.
Yes. I fully agree with every aspect of that you've just stated.
And I know that I said that that Venat was the breakout new character, but I really love Hythlodaeus.
See, the thing is, though, is you were kind of expecting Venat. No one was ready for Hythlodaeus.
Yeah.
No one was ready for that boy. He's so good.
He is so good. I thought he might show up and be like a normal-looking guy who like is a little bit like leans into things a little, but he was just a whole different type of character. So sweet, so funny,
so chaotic. Like there's just like a soul of. I'm not gonna like pick favorites, but boy, did I really love Hythlodaeus.
Yeah.
And do I love him? Like even when they show up at the end, and just I love Emet-Selch is just like, oh, why am I having to be a part of this sort of like final performance on the stage? And Hythlodaeus like, I don't know. The story so far has had catharsis, tears. It's had it all.
It still has.
So good. It's so good.
I'm also really glad that Hythlodaeus shows up with Emmett. I would have been really disappointed if he hadn't.
Yes.
I want to meet the sundered remnants of Hythlodaeus. I want to build myself Hythlodaeus back.
Well, his soul... Well, because he was... there was a sundered Hythlodaeus because he was a part of the sacrifice for Zodiark.
Right.
He'd been trapped within Zodiark the whole time.
Maybe he'll
However,
reincarnate now.
Exactly what I was thinking. that's why we need a time jump now. It's not for any other reason other than we just need to see a fucking reincarnated. So one of the cool things is Labyrinthos was discovered 400 years ago. So that makes it around roughly around late 1100s, and that's around the time of the fall of Sildee.
It's also around the time of the founding of Alamigo.
Oh yeah, absolutely it is. So some stuff going on in the world then. I mean, of course, even if it wasn't those events, there'd be other events going on because fucking things were happening in the 6th Astral Era.
Oh yeah, big time. Let's actually take a look at the timeline, shall we, just briefly?
Yeah, absolutely.
And see what else was going on. I think it's interesting that they were, shortly before this, they started their network of building Aetherites across Eorzea for pay by Belladaya. So,
oh, right. Of course, that's when that first came to be.
yeah, so I think that's an interesting sort of aspect of how they might be financing such things.
So at that time, right, that's going to be obviously before their awareness of, the anti-tower and the need to flee. But that does explain how they were able to fund a lot of the structures that exist within and the excavation of the magma chambers.
This is interesting, actually. So not only is it around the time that Alamigo forms, it's also around the time that the first Pagel is born. So very impactful time. I mean, in fact, it's around 7 years after the first Pagel starts to grow, starts to stop aging.
That's very, very interesting. It makes you. I don't know if there's necessarily anything we're supposed to take from it, because there doesn't necessarily have to be something to take away from it that is important, but it is. I think 400 years was enough time where it made sense that they had excavated it all and started to prepare Labyrinthos. So it's part of it is also just that makes sense.
Yeah.
Although they've mainly been working on it only the past 270 years.
Yeah, definitely. It is interesting. It's really fascinating.
They do refer to more than one magma chamber, though, which makes me wonder if there's actually not another Labyrinthos, obviously, but just other areas that are excavated.
I think we're led to believe that Labyrinthos is the central chamber of a larger complex.
Yeah, especially, I mean, even with just the shafts, the dig site shafts that you are on the sort of right side of the map. So I didn't skip through Labyrinthos because there's a lot of cool info, but I didn't have as many notes of
No, neither do I.
But one of the things I do have is just, boy, does Y'shtola do a lot of exposition in this game, and boy, do I not in any way want it to stop.
I love Y'shtola. I think she's in such a good place as a character. I think she's so... I was so worried. When we leave her in Amnesis, in the season Go Away.
Annider?
Yeah, that's right, Annider. I was really worried that she was going to die or be kidnapped. And I think she
does get kidnapped.
Yeah, she does get kidnapped, doesn't she? But only pseudo.
But it's only two. It basically goes according to her plan from there.
Yeah. I've got a few notes in Labyrinthos. I have I have one that I made while I was playing. I have Sharlayan moving to all caps Mericidia.
Yeah, I had. That's one of the only notes I have too.
They really blueballed us with that one.
Yep. But did they, or did they just be like, hey, you know where we're going?
Yeah, we are.
Hey, you've never heard of Mericidia? Well, guess what? You're going to hear about. Not only have you just heard about it from Tiamat in the patch content, but we keep referencing it. Yep. So we're definitely not going to Corvos and Mericidia anytime soon.
Yes. I also thought that turning into frogs was really cute.
Yes. I love that Aramval is just immediately knows. And it's just
yes, he does.
If you're going to impersonate it, try studying the real thing. And don't try to fool an expert. He's such in a sense, a minor character, but for what time he has on the stage, it is real good.
I kind of get the vibe that he is the Sharlayan equivalent of oh gosh, what's her name? The Arcasoda main NPC, the one who gets trapped in the tower. I forgot her name.
Nadana?
Yeah. I kind of feel like he is the Sharlayan Nadana. He's less sort of integral, but I really like the character.
Yeah, and I think that's, yet another thing to Ent's credit, right? Which is that there's a world in which you keep having him around more because he's cool or interesting, or just because you want to have him equal to Nadana. But instead, he stays around for exactly how important he needs to be and for how relevant he is. Yeah. And then he does show up at the second half of Labyrinthos and with the preparations of the Ragnarok, right? And is fun for a moment there. And so he just a good use of characters, especially with how much they have to get through with each character.
Yeah. I'm starting to think that the Gleaners are permanent postdocs. That's just what their life is.
Well, it's really interesting. He does state very clearly, we are scholars too.
Oh, yeah.
I do think that's important because I think there's a world in which you could assume that like Gleaners are more just like the help, but they very clearly are like, no, we are all a part of this. This is all a thing. We are scholars and students of knowledge too. Just because we are more in and of the world and active in it does not make that less so.
Yes, yeah. I loved the Elpis flower stuff. I love seeing the Elpis flowers.
Just everything about that. Well, and one of the things I really loved, and I know you'll love because of etymology and stuff, but is the fact that they refer to it as a Heartbloom, and then they start to explain, but every single other nation calls it something different, so no one actually knows what it's called or where it's from.
Yes.
And also, Niniri, would you like to explain what Elpis means?
Right, so the word Elpis means hope, which is lampshaded a great deal, of course, in this series. I mean, it's the hope of the Amratines in propagating more life throughout their world. It's the hope of us facing down against the final days. It's the hope of Meteon seeing this bloom, realizing that Hermes has given her a flower, falling to her knees, finally seeing that there is hope in the world. And
we will be talking more about that scene because
it's such a beautiful scene.
It is such a beautiful scene in a vacuum.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
But then you add all the context and weight of everything that has been built up through every expansion prior and everything you have gone through and done throughout Endwalker. And that moment is just everything. It is everything literally in that it is an answer to the thesis statement of Endwalker, right?
Yeah.
And it is also everything in that it is just a beautiful moment of tragic, bittersweet, powerful emotion.
Yeah, you summon Emmet and Hythlodaeus, and that they use their powers to bring about a great spell, a great change. In any other game, that would have been, a fireball or limiting her power in some way. But no, in Endwalker, it is
hope.
It is a field of flowers.
Yeah, it is. I know that me and you both had these moments a couple times throughout Endwalker, like with Amon, but it is in that moment I was so invested. I had no idea what they were going to summon, and the second he snaps his fingers and the flowers begin, I just scream, "Of course!" Because it's of course. What else could it have ever been? Like, there's nothing else. It could have only ever been that, and it's of course. And yet I was so invested, I wasn't trying to like analyze for once. I was just experiencing this beautiful moment.
Yeah, it's extremely beautiful. And I really love that we got some more time with Kryl, sort of as a major character around the time of the Elpis flowers. Kryl and not Kryl. I mean, yes, Kryl is acting as a stand-in, at least for part of it, but it builds up your concern for Kryl. A lot of players probably don't care that much about Kryl. She's to a very, very casual player, she's a caretaker in Shadowbringers, and in Stormblood, she's someone to be kidnapped. She's a little bit inferior, perhaps you might say.
I think there's a lot of ways in which a lot of people could see her as even below a Tartaru by quite a bit if you're not looking.
Yeah, but this game, an entirely separate aside here, not even about Endwalker, but when they first released Kryl's first render, like just before the patch that she came out in, she was carrying like a crystal ball in it, and me and my friends were convinced that this was going to be a new class, like crystal ball class.
Yes, I know the one you're talking about. That's pretty funny. And that crystal ball is the crystal that Matoya has from...
I think that's right.
I'm pretty sure it's the same model.
Yeah, I think it is. It's like that pearly white, yeah.
The other so the one thing I wanted to mention about the flowers too is, well, I mean, there's many of things. I always say one thing I want to mention about it, and what I have is like a bajillion things to say, but do you think the Elpis flowers survived the sundering straight up? Because one, they're entelechies. So they're really rooted a lot in Dynamis, and they are stated to be insanely long-lived and impossible to find in their young state. So to me, that hints at the idea that they've actually been basically existent since the Sundering.
I kind of feel that the presence of Dynamis and to a lesser extent Entelechies are almost beyond the effects of something like the Sundering.
Right. That's part of my supposition as to why it would have survived the Sundering is because of how much it's rooted in Dynamis, which is when the Sundering happened was not something that was sundered.
Yeah,
It would
exactly.
have been Aether.
Yeah. Also, I think my read on the Sundering is that probably quite a few things died, but I think the majority of things lived. Obviously, they lost their knowledge, they lost a great deal of their ether and their sort of physicality, and they also probably lost a vast amount of their knowledge and what they knew, who they were. They became new people essentially. But I think in a very biblical nature, at least a few of most things survived.
Yeah, and I don't just even mean just that they survived, and as in they didn't grow new, but it makes me wonder: were they sundered at all? Do they exist on the reflection?
Right.
Like, were they in any way sundered, or are they their pure, exact sort of? If they had a soul, would they be considered an unsundered? Basically?
I can't imagine that they'd be. I wouldn't imagine that Hydaelyn would have had the ability to sunder such a powerful Endtalker.
Yeah, that's what the fact that they're Endtalkers is like the really key thing to me. But then there's two parts to that, which is the one part being that the comments on it also kind of imply that, and the other being though that there is a difference between an Endtalker that is able to respond to Dynamis and an Endtalker that is made of Dynamis. Like Medion is supposed to be made of pure Dynamis.
Yeah.
But as for us and the flowers, it's not entirely clear if we're not full sail Endtalkers in a way, but we also are referred to by her as one. So like an Endtalker is kind of seems to be a broad ranging concept.
Yeah.
Which makes it a little bit just a little bit more vague, but I thought it'd be a fun thing to talk about.
I mean, in a similar way to perhaps you might think of, in terms of an Aetherlecki, you might think of Meteion as being essentially sort of similar in category to a 12-wood elemental, while we're more similar to like a drake or a particularly large dog or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely follow. I think that's a really interesting and good way to put it. So then in my memory, all the flower stuff happened in a row, but actually you first see the flower and then there's a break between that, and you get the sort of the forum member. You're sort of witnessing Eorzean talk to the forum member.
Yes.
And one of the things that, like Fourchenault and stuff, that I really appreciate the second time around was the first time around he just seems like he's being obstinate and avoidant and like just not giving answers because we have our sacred duty and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the second time around you understand much more like, oh no, he literally can't tell him about it.
Yes. Yeah.
And it might not even be wise to do that. And within that confines, he is literally telling Eorzean everything he possibly can.
He is.
Like everything he is physically able to. And so he comes across in a very different light the second time around.
Yeah, I think the whole forum does. I mean, not like it doesn't recontextualize everything the forum's ever done. It doesn't recontextualize the Astrologian storyline. That
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, there's still the bibliotheques and the people who are fuck them.
Yeah, but it does at least inform a great deal of the story.
Mm-hmm. I also really like that Eorzean has his response to the guy, which is your promised revelations does nothing to contend with our present circumstance, which is kind of like the whole idea behind Louis Swat, the idea behind us in general. So it's this great from someone else's voice and a Charlian voice being like, okay, but there's still the now. Like this now still exists and matters. And then from there we get to, the second go around with the Elpis flowers, and where Krile gets willingly possessed by Hydaelyn.
Yeah.
I do think that's a really key distinction that I think it'd be very easy for someone to be like, oh, Hydaelyn's kind of like, is that dark that she's possessing? And it's like, no, Krile knows what she's doing and is willingly letting her do
Yeah, she's reaching out. She's trying to make contact. She says, I can almost reach you. She's like desperately. She doesn't, I don't think she knows at that point who Hydaelyn, like when she says, I can almost reach you, she says she doesn't know who it is and she's surprised.
Yeah.
But she's willing.
Yeah. And my read is definitely that even before she knows, like, it isn't just she reaches out and immediately possessed. It's like there's some kind of communication or something in some way that makes it very explicit that she is granting consent. This makes me think of a side note I have on this, which I find very funny, which is while she's possessed, technically she looks like a Dunes folk Lelafel.
I know, I felt very represented.
Which I thought was really funny because it hasn't been that long, but I was just thinking that I don't know if I just didn't think about it or was so invested, but I didn't really notice that the first time around. But this time I immediately went like, oh, hey.
Yeah, that's true. We didn't have many. Well, outside of we didn't have in the last 2 expansions. Well, obviously in Shadowbringers, we haven't had many Dunes folk NPCs outside of Pippin, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's really Nanamo is basically kind of like the main major figure.
Yeah.
Do you ever have the thing where you misremember Lalfel's eyes and forget if they're Planesfolk or Dunesfolk?
Yes, but
I've definitely done that.
I usually just trace them back to their place of origin, and I'm like, if it's Uldar, they're probably Dunesfolk. If it's somewhere else, they're probably Planesfolk.
See, but then you get Dulala.
That's true. But then you get Falamin, and let's talk about how that's confusing.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a whole thing. So that makes me, I think this is pretty clear and explicit, but I think it's just worth talking about really quick, which is, so do we assume that the Echo is the mechanic by which people may act as a medium for Hydaelyn? Do we have to assume that someone has the Echo in order to do so? Because the only people we know so far, Minfilia and Kryl, are specifically 2 people who had the Echo.
Yes, I suppose that's true, but I also think that it's a very different thing what we see with Minfilia and what we see with Kryl.
Yes.
I think that Kryl's is a combination of her Echo, which is almost a special form of the Echo in how we see her sort of interact with it, and the Enteleki and the Elpis, which I almost read it as it channeling Hydaelyn Vanar's emotions and allowing them to connect. That's why she goes to the flower. That's why she's holding out a hand to it.
I have another pitch that it can be in addition to yours.
Yeah.
Which is our proximity to the Aetioscope and the fact that we're further underground and closer to the Ethereal Sea.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the first time, it only starts happening once you get deep underground.
Yes, that's plausible. I suppose then you have to sort of think about the anti-tower, right? Could we have achieved the same thing by going down there?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's an argument to be said that if we had done that, we might have had an easier time trying to contact her, but then we wouldn't be doing the thing that we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
So it's maybe that would have worked to allow her to reach out, but we would have had to have known to do that, and we wouldn't have known to do that without her telling us. So I don't know. Obviously, we know that she can present herself in a certain amount of form because she does so on the boat, right?
Yeah.
But she states that she was unable to cast even basic spells. And so it makes me wonder if it's just easier to connect to Kryl, or maybe more specifically, anyone who's not the Warrior of Light. Because we not only have a connection to her, right? In a conjunction of time sense, in many different senses, we also bear her Traveler's Ward.
Yes.
And so it doesn't seem like anyone else has any form of connection to her at this point that's able to maintain in any meaningful way, because whether because she's too weak and only needs to save sending energy out to us, or because it's just of all the people, we're the easiest to connect to.
I think it is a conservation of energy type thing, but I also think that it would make sense for someone who bears the Echo to be the ones who, are most able for this process to take place. Speaking of the anti-tower, just as a slight aside, I don't know if you went to talk to Y'shtola and Minfilia, Y'shtola and Matoya in Matoya's lair after, because they have new dialogue in the post game.
Oh, I know I haven't. That's one I haven't done.
Matoya is really annoyed with Sharlayan, and because she's been living in Dravanian hinterlands, she's trying to claim squatters' rights over the anti-tower.
Yeah. Okay.
She's like, "This is mine now."
I mean, she's right. She's fucking right. But also, what the fuck is she gonna do with the Ethereal Sea with Hydaelyn's gods? Cool. I mean, I guess you could just study Aether.
Creation magic? Is this how we get the reintroduction of creation magic?
Oh, do we have enough ethereal capable? Well, I mean, we can summon primals, so I mean,
I think so.
Magic does exist.
I mean, obviously the mother crystal's now gone. We've drained that, but there's still vast amounts of Aether down there. We could probably I'm not saying you're gonna make something pretty, but you could make something down there.
Well, you have to wonder how much Aether was returned to the star from Zodiark.
Probably a massive amount, right?
One would think. I mean, it could have technically, in theory, been dissipated out into the world. A lot of it could still be in the moon. A lot of different things could have happened to it.
I think we know that a lot of it is still in the moon, but I think probably a fair amount of it went back to. I mean, if if Hythlodaeus' soul is back in the Ethereal Sea, then presumably part of it has to have come back.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think the only counterpoint to that you could come up with, that I don't necessarily believe, but you could come up with, is that his soul is actually technically still within the moon, and it was just drawn from the moon the same way Emmett's was drawn from the Ethereal Sea to Ultima Thule. Because we don't technically know where they were drawn from.
That's true, but I feel like they had a chat. I just in my mind, in my heart, I feel like Emmett and Hythlodaeus had a catch up.
I agree, and that is my read on it. I just, to let myself have my opinion that I feel most strong about, I like to state the counterpoints so that I can acknowledge them and refute them where needed.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
The bloom will be your guide.
Will be your guide, test and proof of your conviction. In darkness, seek joy. Surrender not to sadness, and see beyond despair. Walk free, and bear the light for others to follow. Together, raise it aloft and let it shine, till the end, blinding and radiant.
I mean, she's literally telling us how to beat Meteion.
Yeah, she's literally telling us how to beat Meteion. She's literally telling us the theme of Endwalker yet again. Like, it's another character being like, and here's the theme of Endwalker, but now in my version.
Yeah.
It's real good. And like you say, it is explicitly telling us to be Meteion. I also think it fuels into that sort of point I had about in a prior lore talk about the Warrior of Light being a kind of Messiah figure, but their purpose being to allow... You are a bearer of light. You are a Warrior of Light and a bearer of light, but it's for others to be able to save themselves, right? It's for others to be able to believe. It's not just you, singular, the person who brings about the saving of the world. It's you are able to do it because of all those who stand behind you and stand with you. And you bring about a better world. You are able to stand so that others may fight for the better world too.
Yes, exactly. And I think now that I'm thinking on this, you see this through previous iterations of Warriors of Light as well. You know, assuming that Tenzin is Tenzin's main thing is that he elevates and frees and sort of, taming isn't the right word at all, but sort of helps
empowers
the auspices.
Absolutely. So then we get to the forum detaining. So Fourchenault's like, we caught your friend. You guys are snooping around. Come on, let's go hold a trial. That's where you get the cameo for Silvestri Albright.
It is.
Who was in the Astrologian quest and was for the longest time the vast majority of what we knew about the forum.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that we had a image of and some stuff about Fourchenault in Encyclopedia Eorzean Volume 1, which is so cool that the fact that we had his appearance and his name and a lot about his disposition in a book that came out 5 years before the expansion.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he gets name dropped in Coil as well by Eorzean a little bit.
I think so. I think you're right.
It's really good. I mean, the Fourchenault is, I think, a pretty good character. I quite enjoy Fourchenault, and I enjoy the forum as well. They sort of
they're complicated.
They are complicated, and you've got these You've got Silvestri, who's a dick. You've got
just fuck him.
You've got Fourchenault, who's a complex character. You've got the
Monteshane.
Yeah, Monteshane. You've got the speaker.
Yep.
Yeah,
Brian. And it's not Brian, but it's I think it's like Brianne or something.
Yeah, and then but you also have you have the background characters chiming in as well, and it's not all just jeering. You've got you've got that the woman saying, "You have tarnished the good names of the students. Galuf would be ashamed."
I have a note on that too. So when she said that, when I first played it, I literally yelled out loud. I was just like, "No, he would be proud."
Yeah, Galuf was an interventionist. That's a wild thing to say, but
yeah, it's like you don't know the man at all if you think that. And I love so much. I was so worried when she said that, and Kryle kind of looks down for a second that Kryle wasn't gonna have a response, but then Kryle refutes her, and I'm like,
she does.
No, yeah. Kryle knows that he would have been proud of her.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it makes sense because Galuf was on a different island from the rest of the Shard. The students of Baldassian don't seem to be separate massively from the Sharlians, politically and culturally, but I imagine he didn't
They're as
spend
separate as they can be.
Yeah, I imagine he didn't spend a massive amount of time in the forum chamber, you know.
Well, especially
wouldn't
with
think.
contending with Eureka and all that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really like about that scene is that there is a certain amount that having Fourchenault and the others have their points that does allow you to look at the Scions and see, okay, if you didn't have the full context of the Scions, you could look at them kind of like fanatical doomsday evangelists. From like there's a way in which if you don't trust the Scions and you don't necessarily think they're right, there's a way in which I can understand why the forum sees them so antagonistically.
Yeah, I see that as well.
I don't agree, but what I like is that I feel like the game does try, without in any way making you try to feel bad about your actions,
Yeah.
gleaning a little bit of their perspective on how they see you. And it's always having those lenses are what does a lot to increase the depth.
Yeah, I mentioned this in another lot when you said your messianic comment that we are, a messiah, but we're also elevating people, not saving them necessarily. I said we are a messianic figure, but we're also the biblical flood. We're also,
yep.
We are, for all intents and purposes, overthrowing regimes and killing gods. And Hydaelyn is using some pretty slightly maybe disreputable magic and is with Matoya, who probably has plenty of enemies because she certainly doesn't mince words.
Well, and Vritra later on gets this right with like the way in which your life is tied to all these different threads and how that affects the people around you and will inevitably pain and cause no end of heartache to those around you, but it is also a value and worthwhile.
And then we get the bit from the trailer, from the animated trailer, basically.
Yes. Yep.
In which she stole the laser smackdown on the forum.
Well, and I love, she has the line, "Are you so preoccupied with your momentous duty of an age past that even the end of the world is unworthy of your attention?" Which the first time around, you feel very vindicated, like, fuck yeah, you stole it. Second time around, you're just like, ooh, like, no, the problem is that they're too focused on the end of the world.
Yeah, but I think the line holds up because
absolutely.
Not only is she saying the end of the world unworthy of attention, she's also sort of saying the consequences of the end of the world. Yes, you might prevent it for some people, but there will be casualties. There will be millions of people who die and millions more who suffer before you manage to save them, and you're not doing anything.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It is more of a condemnation of a lack of intervention more than it is a condemnation of, oh, they're not helping us stop. I mean, it is not stopping the final days, but like, it isn't that they're utterly aloof.
Yeah,
is the singular condemnation there. And so I think you're right. I think the line absolutely holds up, and I just love that there is that second layer to it upon review.
Yes, I would see. I would pay a good deal of money to get a short story about Louis Soir and Montaigne chatting and like being like grouchy, slightly like wry old men with each other.
Yeah, I absolutely, and well, like slightly grouchy, wry old men who are also cheery in contrast to everyone around them.
Yeah.
What I would also really love is a short story from Fourchenault's perspective. Like, I don't care where it is in the timeline, but I would really love that.
I would love to see like a young adventurer Fourchenault asking Emiliance's father for a hand in marriage, like going on a mission and coming home, and
it's so cute.
That kind of stuff. That would be so sweet.
I literally have a note somewhere in here, which is just I would fucking love to see what young Fourchenault was like. Not even because, regardless of what he's like, I just think that would be really, like, how much is he like young Alphinaud? How much is he like, more like his grandfather versus after he joins the forum? Or how much? It seems like he was always a little bit more. He was always kind of how he is now, and it just became much more concreted with the revelation of the final days. But
yeah, we know that he was serious, but not as extreme. Yeah.
So then we kind of go to Emiliance's, so Graha then does his whole reveal of, oh, Charlane used to be about preserving knowledge for the sake of people, but now it's using people for the sake of preserving knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's great. Like, it's this great, like, I don't even say it is foreshadowing, but it's like this setting up of the pieces of, okay, like, what you're getting a little bit more and more breadcrumbs, like what exactly is their plan?
Yes.
And then Montaigne comes in, and I hope that's his name. I feel like I heard that, like, I read his name, and that's how Alphino pronounces his name, but I think it's Montaigne.
Yeah,
if I'm
Skylark
wrong,
Montaigne, that's right.
So then he steps in for us with what I love about it is that he steps in with us on our side, but steps in reasonably and with a very Charlene way of stepping in for us, not just like, oh, comes to our rescue and absolutely proclaims how we're good. It's like, no.
Right.
He's just like, okay, let's be reasonable. We all would fucking look out deep secrets. We all know it. Let's accept that. Okay, they're fine. We'll keep an eye on them. It'll be good.
Right.
And I just appreciate that he uses rational logic in a very Charlene way to make his point, while also being the very like warm guy that we find later on.
Yeah.
We then go to the
Emeliant stuff.
Yeah, Leveilleur. Sorry, the Leveilleur mansion. I kept wanting the Fourchenault mansion, which is technically true, but
It really, I found the mansion really hammered home how much of like, not only are they a prominent family, they're just aristocrats outright.
yeah, they are Charlene royalty.
Yeah.
Functionally, one thing that I really makes me feel sad about the mansion is that we can't walk into the twins' bedroom, and because that would be so much great characterization to see in those.
Yeah, I would love to see some more rooms. I'd love to see like Fourchenault's office. I'd love to see like Emeliance's. They probably couldn't reveal that to us until later, but Fourchenault's office, Emeliance's like dressing room, the bedrooms of the twins, like a dining room, just more of it. It's also a pretty it's a really beautiful building. I mean, it looks horrible to live in, but really beautiful.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where even if that had been like their plan, but they have black time, like that's an absolutely understandable thing to cut.
Yeah.
If you're worried about time, like that's the place. So I've been thinking about this for a long time, but why wasn't Louisoix sage?
So I have a thought on this as well. Say that you have a Dark Knight. It's a Dark Knight. Yeah, a Dark Knight and a Paladin. They're both at max level. You like them. You like them both. But your
Literally true for me
is see, I'm just a Paladin stan. But your Dark Knight is like 60 eye levels above your Paladin, which you're going to take into the raid. You take the Dark Knight, right? And Louisoix has Tupsamati.
Yes. Oh, that's a good point.
So
that's a real good point.
Laid out to us as beyond relic weapon. Like the Tupsamati in its full form was extraordinarily powerful.
Yes. I mean, like a broken version of it was able to still bind Shinryu for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So,
for indeterminate time bubble amount of time.
Yeah. I always read that as like at least a couple of days. Like it's.
I almost read it as like weeks.
Yeah.
We really can't say, can we?
But I had not thought about Tupsamati specifically, so that's a really great call out. But like also there's such an association with him and the study of arcane and like specifically not just sage things, not just healing, but other aspects of Aether and stuff. So I think it still totally works. I don't think it's like a problem, but just with the fact that Fourchenault was one and the importance that sages seem to have, it made me wonder. I also don't think sages are new by any means. The Sage Quest seems to make very clear that they've been around for at least 50 years.
They're not new, but they're maybe new in the grand sense of things.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. Like they're definitely 6th Astral Era because they don't come about until Charlene comes out.
Yeah.
But the question is then when do they show up after that? And I think you could make reasonable guesses as early as 70 years ago, but it could be as late as over 1,000 years ago.
It could be. I almost want to say it's a little bit. It's maybe in the last few hundred years for me. Up to the last like 50, 60, 70 years.
Maybe it's just because the Soul Stone is much more refined than a lot of other ones, but it does remind me much more of Machinist than almost any other job, both in like just kind of its stone and a lot of just things around it, which just it's soft implication, but it makes me kind of think it's definitely within the past 100 years, more likely than not.
I think with Louisoix as well, he seems to have had an academic interest in Eorzean as well, so it makes sense that he would approach an Eorzean discipline perhaps more than a Charlene one. I mean, I don't think we're meant to understand that Louisoix is anything so codified as a conjurer or a white mage. I don't think you could put him into either class. I think he draws more on those, perhaps. Or, I mean, who knows what Charlian Conjury looks like? I mean, we've discussed before, we both believe that Conjury exists under different names and under slightly different forms across the world, probably. So it's just so impossible to answer.
For all we know, the tablet of Thaliak embedded in Tupsamati may have been even partially soul crystal-like and contained skills and knowledge that we don't know about, that even Limo didn't have access to, or maybe he did, and that's what helped him create the seal.
I mean, that's certainly possible. I would love to get more into Tupsamati. I wonder if perhaps in the Thaliak portion, if we have a Thaliak portion of the Mist of the Realm, we might get some more answers on Tupsamati. It's plausible.
I have to believe. So, kind of then the wrapping up of Labyrinthos and all, and Charlian is sort of, well, the first part of Charlian is, I fucking love Emelians.
Yes, I love Emelians.
But part of what I love is that she believes in her children. She doesn't just, I trust them, but she believes in her children. And that is, I think, rare to see. I think it's rare to see. I think not rare to see in everything, but I think there's a lot of times where you experience characters who are like, I trust you, comma, but.
Yeah.
And then there's like, but I need you to come home, or I need you to da-da. Or like, she doesn't turn to you and say, make sure my children come home. She just believes in her children and sends them out to do what they do and to take action and to follow their beliefs. And that I just really appreciated.
I think Emelians comes in with a very valuable perspective of not seeing the issue as a political intrigue, but instead seeing it as, I mean, she's cognizant of that, I'm sure, but of seeing it as her family.
She refused to it as subterfuge.
Yeah, but she doesn't really deal with it in that way. She refuses to engage with it as that. She refuses to, treat her children as spies or treat her husband as an obstacle, as an opponent.
Yep.
She's obviously a very loving person.
Very understanding person.
Yeah.
While also having staunch feelings and beliefs. It's so easy to be someone who's understanding to then be pushed over.
Yeah. I wonder if perhaps it's impossible to be like detached in that way in Charlian.
Yeah. It's an interesting quandary. Well, another episode down. What was meant to be one episode is now 3.
Well, it's a topic we're passionate about.
Maybe next time we can record less and make editing a little bit easier.
Well, the viewers did say they really want longer form content, so.
We like to give the people what they want.
Yeah, we really do.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you for the 3rd episode next week. In the meantime, why not check out some of our other videos?
Or read some articles on the site.
And with that, see you all soon.